Okay. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Amanda Follis. I'm with the City Archives, and I'm really happy to present a program today courtesy of the Louisiana Endowment of the Humanities and the Friends of New Orleans Public Library. Today, we will be watching and discussing the film Iron Sharpens Iron. This is the story of Ironton residents and their experience working with petroleum terminals. What we will do is after the movie is over, we will have a discussion session, again, led by Dr. Angela Allen Bell of Southern University of New Orleans and Dr. Alex Kolker.
Associate professor at the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium. We are the research marine lab for the state of Louisiana. We're part of the Louisiana University's environmental scientist, and I've studied the coast in a lot of different ways. And I was the consulting producer on this film, which essentially meant I helped the lead producer, John Ritchie, think through a lot of some of the environmental issues on the film. It was just a pleasure to make this film. We got to work with and meet great people in Plaquemines Parish, and just some fantastic people that were residents of Ironton. So it was really just a treasure and honor to be able to work with great people as part of this film.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I am Angela Allen Bell, and I'm a law professor at Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge. I was a consulting producer, and my expertise happens to be the intersection of race and law. And so my job was to view the film during the making process through the racial equity lens and offer feedback on how we might be sure to produce something that is in no way culturally imbalanced or inflammatory. And so I'm honored and proud of the end result in the way that it doesn't speak for the people of Ironton, but it allows for those people to speak for themselves. Thank you all for coming.
Located along the banks of Old Man River below the city of New Orleans, we find Plaquemines Parish, a delta land more fertile than any land on earth, which today can be considered one of the richest 100 miles on the North American continent, abounding with natural resources such as fur, fish, oil, citrus fruit, and sulfur.
Plaquemines Parish, we have supported this country for a long time with oil and gas. Through the oil and gas company that was digging canals and bayous to try to get this oil and gas to support United States. And that's what caused a lot of the problems that we have now. So hopefully the rest of the United States, that they realize the importance that that Plaquemine Parish had played on this country. My name is Carlton LaFrance, council member of District 7, Plaquemine Parish government. You know what these companies do. They come in and they come to your community and they pacify the people, they pacify the that I represent. They come in and they always talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. But we've been arguing and fussing for jobs since the 50s and 60s, and now we're in 2021, and what we still arguing about? Jobs.
You know, the Mississippi River is a huge economic driver for the U.S. and for Louisiana. And so we have a lot of industry that exists along the river. We have coal terminals. And one thing that has been proposed in recent years is the Plaquemine's liquid terminal, which is a liquid storage facility. This is right where the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion is planned to be. This is one of the premier projects in that 2017 Coastal Master Plan.
The Mid-Barataria settlement diversion will essentially cut a hole into the levee around the Plaquemines Parish town of Ironton, southeast of New Orleans, and channel part of the river's flow into Barataria Bay. The diversion would build as much as 27 square miles of new land in the Barataria Basin by 2050. Louisiana has lost about 2,000 square miles since 1932.
The sediment diversions are really to reestablish our connection with the river to our basins. When we look at all the tools in our toolbox, the sediment diversion reestablished that root connection with the river and the basins, and also taps into a brand new sediment source that's not being utilized right now. One of the biggest benefactors in this are going to be the folks that are closest to the project right there. So one of the biggest components is putting the green space in front of the levees or protecting those investments in terms of storm surge and also knocking down the waves. So those are going to be some of the biggest benefits for the town of Ironton.
The people in Ironton are really caring and loving people.
This is one of the oldest black communities in Plaquemine Parish.
The best thing is that you can raise children back here without them getting into trouble.
I was born in New Orleans, but I lived here in Ironton practically all my life. My childhood was every street here in Ironton.
It wasn't a rich community, but if you want to say we were rich and, you know, it just people had a lot of different characters in this community, and we were rich in that way.
Ironton is a quiet, peaceful place. Everybody around here know each other. Everybody around here trusts each other.
A lot of the cousins and stuff that I hang with now outside of here, we all grew up in that same yard down the street.
Home. Ironton is home to me. We've been fighting all our life for things that we got back here. Nobody gave us nothing without a fight.
Ironton, a hamlet in Plaquemines Parish. Population 200, all of them black. Its one distinguishing feature, Ironton has no running water.
Do you think Charlotte would have had water to Ironton if there were one white family living in Ironton? There would have been water.
As a child, I had to go to the river, Mississippi River, and get water and bring it to my mom. Race have always been a problem in this parish. This is one of the most segregated parishes. It done got a little better, but not behind the doors, no.
PLT, Plaquemine Liquid Terminal, is going to be built on the St. Rosalie Plantation. they are planning on putting storage tanks there where they can store different type of crude oil on stuff on that basis. And that project have some controversies on it.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council, serving as the sole governing authority of the Plaquemines Port Harbor Internal District, to order at 3:01 p.m. Commissioner Kognovich.
That site was a St. Rosalie plantation. It was a black-owned plantation, sold it around 1880. Had slaves in a slave graveyard. And out of them 12,000 artifacts, I heard they had human remains found in it. So that's why we wanted to hurry up and get it to UNO so nobody would find that?
No, because I sent all the remains to the entire board months prior to actually voting on it. So all of you had the list of remains.
So what is the procedure we have to follow when we find human bones on a site?
We followed it. We made sure they're curated, and that's why we're working with UNO to make sure they're curated, sir.
As far as I understand, I think human remains are not supposed to be curated, but reinterred on site.
My question is, if human bones were found on the site, and that site is in my district, why wasn't I notified?
A very a touchy subject. I think in the future, it'd probably be prudent to flag something like that, not have it buried in a 200-page attachment. It kind of boggles the mind that we wouldn't have had a discussion or a specific meeting around something like that. Things of that nature put a complete stop to projects like PLT. And I'm a little surprised that the board wasn't apprised of that, how big of a deal that really is from the very beginning.
There's a Norman's map from 1858 showing all of the cemeteries from New Orleans, Louisiana to Natchez, Mississippi. And I took it upon myself to count those one day, and between large and small land holdings, there's nearly 1,000 plantation sites. And if you think about that for a minute, if it was a large home, it would have had a burial site for the family and then a separate burial site for the enslaved persons. Now, if you think of nearly 700 to 1,000 burial sites or land holding sites, how many burial sites would that be that we don't know about?
There's always something trying to be put around Ironton. Sometimes things are kind of blacked out from the view of the public while maybe projects are being considered. You know, when you add this other layer that even the people that represent you aren't getting the full story all the time, that in and of itself makes it harder too. I mean, you could see into the window here how democracy is just short-circuited for economic gains, and it repeatedly happens.
Economically, the parish sometimes act before they think. And there's a lot of things that's being done behind our backs and under the table that's not being presented to us in the right way. And that's why you see a lot of people that's from this community always on the defense. You know, we always on the defense because you can't trust anybody. And that's because of the prior administration that we had to deal with in the past.
Judge Leander Perez is the undisputed boss of Plaquemines Parish, south of New Orleans. Workhorse. And Plaquemines Parish is the undisputed repository of some of the densest accumulations of oil and sulfur deposits, from which we can infer the obvious. The Judge Perez, in addition to being a very successful politician, is a very wealthy one. I should like to begin by asking Judge Perez whether he distinguishes between his views on segregation and those of Governor Wallace.
I am against the federal government using its coercive power to force racial integration upon an unwilling free people.
What I know about Perez is he was able to acquire vast tracts of land around the parish and funnel that wealth to his company. You know, this is all well documented. He ruled this place sort of with an iron fist, depending on who you were. During integration, Perez had these academies pop up overnight. If he was required that the schools had to be integrated, he just propped up these private schools. And so over a long summer, slabs were laid, metal buildings were put up, and oak trees were planted, and they had 6 of these things or so around the parish. That's sort of the backdrop of what's been going on here for a very long time.
Why would the parish, knowing that it has a cemetery, knowing that it was a historical site? I don't know why they didn't consider that also, and I just felt like they wanted to just put a dollar before humanity or concern of the people.
They were hoping that we wouldn't even read the archaeological report and just kind of let it go by the wayside.
There's a good reason for us not to trust this parish. I don't know why Ironton is so important for them to try to put everything here. There's like tons of land further down that they can do the same thing and not affect or not bother anyone. Or you put another plant here and then put another one below us. I say all of them have spills that are leaks that we never know about, and they have them at the same time. Then what are we supposed to do?
This week we are planning on going visiting the site. And we had set up a meeting in Ironton where we had met already with the people from PLT. And now this Friday, we are going out and we're going to do a field visit.
A couple things real quick before we head out. We've got a beautiful day here, and thank you all very much. As I want to continue to reiterate, thank you so much for your participation. I'm very excited about this, to be able to learn more about the history, to see the site, to learn from all of you, as I've been talking with many of you already. This is awesome. I'm excited to hear more about the history, learn about the history, and as we've said all along, preserve and protect it. We have every intention of doing that and want to make sure that we honor those and that history and that past.
If we planned this trip and y'all knew we was coming out here, why y'all didn't try to cut the grass?
I'm from Colorado. I didn't know what the site would look like, but nonetheless, we could certainly schedule another trip to see it.
And it's not prepared for people to come and see. Okay. Right here.
This is the natural state of what the site was when we originally came out here.
I understand that. I understand that. But the natural site, when you first came out here, you didn't expect to bring citizens out here. Come do observations. It's kind of hard to do observation when the grass is not cut.
All right. So where we're standing right now is pretty much dead center of what we found to be the workers' quarters slash slave quarters area. In this area, this is where we found the majority of the 13,000 artifacts that we collected, ranging anywhere from pocket watches to kitchen utensils, a lot of porcelain plates.
Most of the excavation areas on the north end, especially in the early phases, what happens long term, I guess that's part of these discussions that we're having as to how we, again, preserve, protect what the history is here. But certainly the initial phases of any development would happen up on the north end, up near the refinery area.
Speaking to the people that is here, they would prefer to end this tour and wait until this site is better prepared. Again, we have elderly people in here, and this is not a safe environment. So the people that is here behind me, they would like to end this tour now.
The least we can do is just cut the grass so when they do come and see, they get a better picture of how you really feel about it.
Sure. No.
You know, if they come out here and see all the grass, the first thing they say, well, they don't really care about us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, believe me, sir, I would have,
right.
had I known
I'm
just
being honest with you. I'm just being honest with you. I'm just being honest with you. And the other thing is, before we make any decisions, I want to make sure all the relatives that I talk to get an opportunity to have a say on what happens, because my relatives here, but there are a lot of family relatives here.
Sure.
So I don't make no decision as to what you're going to do until we talk to all the relatives.
The old folks that was buried up there and been up there in their grave for all this time can't speak for themselves. So we's trying to convey our voice so that our elected officials today supposed to be living in a civilized generation act like civilized people.
And now you're trying to hold on to what's left of your deceased relatives and your deceased parents, and somebody want to come and take it away from you? That's not right.
That dock, that terminal there, would have made the mid-Barataria sediment diversion something like 17% less effective.
If this project were put in place, if you had ships docked there regularly, could severely reduce how much land one could build. And then you're just leaving the area more vulnerable over time, including the Plaquemines liquid terminal itself becomes more vulnerable as the land around it disappears.
Right now at 6 o'clock, sandbags and supplies, an all too familiar sight along the Gulf Coast during hurricane season. This time it's southeast Louisiana making those preparations as Hurricane Ida gains strength.
Ida continues to strengthen this evening. All signs indicate this will become a major hurricane on its trip to Louisiana.
Ironton was totally devastated. We had anywhere from 12 to 15 feet of water.
We left for the storm, and
in the back of my mind, in the back of everybody's mind, was wondering if they're going to come back and find their homes intact, because the way Hurricane Ida had to testify. And we saw the pictures on TV, and Ida was worse than Katrina and Ida at the devastation that we saw.
One day it's like going from paradise to hell. Pretty much like going from paradise to hell.
Let's face it, the reason why we got the water is because we didn't have the levee protection. And all this is man-made problems. All this is man-made problems. Plaquemine Parish was built up on nutrient and silt that was coming down the Mississippi River. Man came and built levees. They built levees, but however, they didn't provide the water to maintain our marsh.
So now you see the graveyard a little bit. And once we round the corner, you're gonna see some more caskets sitting down on the ground. Just caskets, they bust out of their tombs.
The most heartbreaking thing was, more than anything was, to see our relatives coffin floating in the water, and the tombs that they were housed in. Some of them was demolished, others were damaged, and we realized that the storm, not only did it affect us mentally and spiritually, but it also affected us emotionally, because when you bury somebody, you bury them and put them to rest.
Man. Oh, something bigger wanted more than us to allow stuff like this to happen when it happened before and over again, and they did nothing to protect us.
We cannot keep on doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. I think they should rebuild because it's home. You know, you always hear people saying that the people from here are resilient, but my people are tired. My people are tired.
Thank you everyone for coming. We want to thank Councilmember Freddie King for being here. Thank you so much. That means a lot. With that done.
Yeah, so every time I see this, I have an emotional reaction, and I don't want to start by excluding your voices. So I'm interested in hearing, how do we feel? Anybody have any immediate thoughts before? Yes, sir. I see a hand in the back, and then after him, a lady in the front.
I was general reason I was sitting down and talk, often pieces of film. I passed through Iron many times going to the football game. I never knew the history. And we were talking about how that Iron's history is about people. And at the end of the film, I noticed some company offering a buyout. Is there any number of regular people that actually went into the buyout? Nobody did it.
So to answer the question, do you know anything? I don't know any. The last I heard, no one had taken a buyout, but I don't know if you know more. The sentiment I get is that no amount of money can separate these people from Ironton. They want to be in Ironton. And so they weren't interested in the buyout. They were interested in Ironton being restored and improved. And so that was not what they wanted. There's a lady here in the front. I'm so happy to see. And then we have one in the back and one here. Yes, ma'am.
Right now, FEMA has decided that if you live in certain areas, in most areas in the Platinum area, you gotta put your house up in the air. People don't have that kind of money to do. It is horrible. I live right across from Ironton. We are affected just like Ironton. We had our land was there. Our forefathers bought the land, moved from Mount Sequoia, built a church, and the family had land. And that's where a lot of people live. It's like, this is what they did. And that's our homestead. And it seems like they want us out of our homestead. Plaquemine Parish seems like it's not gonna be like it should be. And people who have houses, family land, it's all being taken away from them. It's gonna be taken away from them. And these people will not have any place to live.
And I'm so thankful to you and all that pain that you took a moment to enlighten us, because so many of us are not aware of some of the logistics. And one other thing I want to say in response to that is, the last time when we did this showing, we did have some people with us from Ironton, and what they shared with the audience that night was that after Ida, they received a minimal amount of funds to start rebuilding. And as they were in the process of rebuilding, FEMA changed the rules and said to them that you will not be able to get your house completed until you elevate, but they had already used a chunk of the funds to do the initial rebuilding. So that became an obstacle for many of those people. And that's sort of a comment that I think you're trying to share with us, that the rules became a moving target for them as they tried to rebuild after Ida.
And I would also say that, yeah, flood insurance rates are going up around the country because FEMA is adjusting the model for how it assesses flood insurance rates. It's going up around the country, but low-lying areas in Louisiana are seeing some of the largest rate increases in the country, because this area is because we flood so frequently and so extreme. So that's, I think, part of the broader picture. But I think there were some other people, maybe the woman in
There was a lady in the back first, and then there's a lady over here, and then this lady in the white shirt.
You?
Yes.
I'm a resident of Ironton, my husband and my daughter. And we still devastated. We are not able to go back because of the elevation. We used what we had to live those 2 years. We had to clean up on our own land. We had to do everything ourselves. No help from FEMA, no one. From the parish, nobody. And right now, this is what we're doing, living from pillar to post.
Thank you. There was a lady on this side, and then this lady in the front, and then the gentleman in the black.
Good afternoon. But the original question I think you were saying was, how are you feeling? And I was feeling a mix of um, sadness, but also kind of numbness, because this is not new. It is not the only one. They're doing it all over. Like in the beginning of the movie showed St. John the Baptist Parish, St. James Parish. We can look at Orleans Parish and see where the lower income and especially Black communities are neglected, ignored until somebody wants to come in and make money off of them. And it's just a consistent pattern of people not having the resources to, one, fight the legal battles, and to, two, prepare and repair their homes to fight something that they're not the cause of. We're not causing climate change. We're not drilling oil. We are not making chemicals. We're just living. And so to me, it was just a repetition of what keeps happening and keeps happening all over, not really just the state, but nationwide. It's just worldwide, really. Low income, Black, poor, brown, indigenous places get taken advantage of by whoever has the biggest dollar.
My question has to do with the levees. I'm a resident of Orleans Parish, but I pastor a church in Plaquemines Parish and was part of the very first nonprofit team in after Ida, while it was still a mandatory evacuation zone, when we had permission to go down and bring relief. I noticed that the levee height varies greatly south of the flood wall, from Belle Chase being the shortest in the Ironton and then in Myrtle Grove areas, and then slightly taller in West Point Lahash, and then still taller in Buras. Were those levees historically built by the federal government, or was this an issue that was caused by Plaquemines Parish? Because they had roughly the same storm surge, but yet in Ironton, there were the marsh grasses hanging from the phone lines. And then down in West Point Lahash, they were not hanging from the phone lines, though they still were definitely devastated in West Point Lahash and Diamond areas. But then further down in Buras, where the levees were higher, there were fewer homes that took the 8 to 13-foot storm surge. So the question's about the history of the levees in Plaquemines Parish below the flood wall.
Yeah, the history of the levees in Plaquemines Parish, in a way, a little like the history of levees across Louisiana, is a patchwork, and there is a patchwork of state and federal levees that are in that are in various states of construction, right? The federal government runs the Mississippi River levees, and so it runs those levees on the grounds of commerce, that the Mississippi River is a major shipping pathway. There are other levees that are in the area, some of which have been run by the state and some have been local, and there's now a new federal levee system moving in that goes from, I think it's called like the New Orleans to Venice levee, that will be a levee on the bay side, on the Barataria Bay side. My understanding of one of the things that happened during Hurricane Ida is that levee system was not fully in place, that they were beginning to build that levee system before Ida. I think they had started about a year or so before Ida, but it had like a big notch actually in the road that takes you to down Hermitage Road. And so during Hurricane Ida, that levee system was essentially wide open, and that notch, along with the general fact that the levee was not complete, was one of the big things that contributed to the flooding in Ironton. That levee, I think, has been raised now. But on the other hand, you now also have this huge LNG facility, right? You have the Venture Global LNG facility that is going to have an even larger levee surrounding it. For those that don't know, Venture Global LNG is a large gas exporting terminal that is about 7 miles south of Ironton. It's like a $13 billion facility with a $7 billion extension, and that is going to have its own private levee system around it that's like even higher. I think it's going to be 25 feet. Of course, when you build a levee, anytime you build a levee, you can raise water out for, you can lower water levels inside the levee system and raise water levels for people outside the levee system. So this patchwork of flood systems and who's in and who's out, it raises justice concerns about who gets to be inside the levee system and who gets to be outside, who is forced to be outside the levee system. And so it does raise, a lot of equity concerns of who is in and who is outside the levee and how are those decisions made.
Thank you. And I did mean the back levies, so thank you for
Yeah.
referring to those that aren't on the call.
Thank you very much for the film. My question is directed to Dr. Angela. The reason why my question is directed to you, because after the film you mentioned that FEMA had overturned, rebuilding and having that funding. So I was wondering, under constitutional law, Article 1 suggests that we have a Congress. How have the neighborhood associations, the community gone about lobbying to the congressmen? What have the state senators, what have the congressional representatives said to create policy in order to help FEMA readjust?
Unfortunately, I think that is the obstacle here, because there has not been an organized effort to identify a certain FEMA official and to make sure that solutions are fashioned uniquely for this situation in Ironton. And I make that statement because in Mississippi, after Hurricane Katrina, that's exactly how they were able to make their decisions financially as to how those appropriations will be made. But there was a legal team there in Mississippi that said, hey, listen, you can't just write checks the same amount for different populations because the loss is different. Lawyers led that movement post-Katrina in Mississippi, and that's why it was effective. So I think you're asking me about negotiating with FEMA and having a person there to communicate with, but I want to tell you that I think there's a problem more complicated than that. And the problem I see in all of these injustices, whether it be environmental, correctional systems, criminal justice, whatever we would call it, is this. Law schools, if you look at the origination of law schools in this country, they are a response to when the country became industrialized. And so why did we need to start training lawyers? Because when we have industry, we need money, correct? And we need to start making sure there's somebody to protect capitalist interests. So law schools, the very first curriculum that was introduced teaches you courses that have to do with protecting wealth, capitalism, torts, right? When you sue somebody, property law, contracts law. That's the first year law curriculum. And guess when it was introduced? 1800s. Guess what I studied as a lawyer? That same curriculum. Your Councilman Freddie King sitting over here, that was my law student. Guess what he studied, right? Now, guess what law schools don't teach? They don't teach any of this. They don't teach anything to do with social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, racial justice, and that's why this country is in this situation. Now, you may say, well, Professor Bell, that's true of the other law schools, but the HBCUs, they're out there too. I'm a product of an HBCU. And when I attended an HBCU, there was not even a civil rights course. There still isn't one this semester, by the way. So I just want to make sure that we understand contextually that usually movements happen because of lawyers. Usually lawyers are the people who go into rooms and negotiate with FEMA officials and say, this is not the way we're going to do this. We need to make sure we're consistent, but you don't have legal training in this country preparing people for this fight. So it is of my opinion now that people have to be armed and people have to be equipped with the ability now to advocate for themselves. And so the people of Ironton, when we met with them at the last showing, many of them said to us that they had been on the phone lines with FEMA. 12 hours, you're on hold, you can't get a person. That's not going to give us a collective solution. There needs to be an official who is designated from the Congress to represent this pocket of the country. That has not happened, and I think that's why we don't have an answer.
That was very good, but there was one particular point that that I didn't highlight as well. In 1776, when the Constitution was created, that, chronologically superseded the law schools in the 1800s. So under Article 1, we have the legislation who are voted in, who make the laws, initially. So my question was, if the congressmen on the state upper and lower, the senator in the House of Representatives make law, which is federal, it would supersede. FEMA would have to fall in line, just like federal law and state law. State law can vary among states, but it has to be aligned with national law. So the national senators, the National House of Representatives, impacting policy concerning this region in this regard.
I think it's the reverse. So in other words, Congress is equipped to appropriate to FEMA, but Congress is not equipped to mandate or micromanage FEMA. So that FEMA director is the person who is equipped with the authority that you're speaking of, not Congress. And it happens to be, fortunately for the people of Ironton, our regional FEMA director is one of Louisiana's former legislators, right? So this is a person who kind of has their pulses on this situation, but that person really has the authority to say, we're not going to change the rules as we go, or these will be the rules, and this is the way we're going to follow this out. But there has to be some type of communication developed between this community and that official, and that's what has not happened. So what this community is doing, each individual resident is calling FEMA's 1-800 number and speaking to some random person who doesn't have authority. Do you see what I mean? To change any course of action or policy decisions that are being made. That policy actor is the person who's absent in this.
And I would also say, a lot of our FEMA policies were developed decades ago, before the modern era of climate change, right? And now, as we are seeing, they were sort of developed thinking that, disasters were rare events that would happen periodically. As we see more and more disasters taking place, like FEMA has more and more work to do, and there are more and more people on the front lines of climate change.
And one other thing before we get to your question, because it ties both of these together, if you read the congressional hearings after Hurricane Katrina, because Congress did extensive hearings to understand how does a Katrina even happen, right? Because as you make the point, we have a FEMA director, and what comes out in the hearing is the FEMA director says, well, yeah, I am the FEMA director, but I have no disaster experience. That's on the record. So you probably want to read that to kind of understand how this kind of thing can happen.
Hi, can you hear me? This is a little bit off topic, but it's related. I live in the lower 9th Ward in Holy Cross, and we've been fighting the industrial canal for probably 30 years now. And that's apparently being revived, and that's going to put us at more risk. But I'm also very aware, because we're so close to St. Bernard, that they're starting to move ahead with that terminal down there in Violet. And I guess it's been approved, although people are still trying to, resist. But my question to you is, isn't putting a terminal in there, in that very vulnerable wetlands, isn't that going to create more hurricane and flooding risk? I mean, why are we putting a terminal there? I don't think we should have one anywhere. I don't think we should be widening the canal and bringing the Mississippi River into a neighborhood. I mean, it's insanity. I'm part of a neighborhood group, and they keep trying to talk to our city council people. I said, we have to drive to Washington. I'm sorry. This decision is going to be made outside of this state by people who do not understand what is going on here and what that's going to do to us. And we have to explain to them how this is going to put us at risk for decades.
I mean, I think it's useful to put this in the sort of broader context, right? That, and no, I'm not going to make judgments about, but in the broader context, right, we're seeing this really sort of large expansion of petrochemical facilities and of of industrial plants across South Louisiana, with sort of two major areas where we're seeing this expansion in industrial activity. And one is the Mississippi River corridor between about Baton Rouge and New Orleans, this community, this area sometimes the people call Cancer Alley, but it's basically between the Mississippi River, between basically Baton Rouge and this new LNG facility down in Plaquemines, and then also in the Lake Charles area, right? And that is largely driven by fracking, right? The U.S. has seen this huge expansion in our production of oil and gas as a result of fracking. And what we're seeing is a big build out of industrial facilities across South Louisiana, again, mostly either in the southeast along the Mississippi River between about Baton Rouge and south of New Orleans, and over in the Lake Charles area. And that is, fueling pressure for container terminals, for petrochemical facilities, for the expansion of the Mississippi River to dredge the river to a deeper depth. So we're seeing, this large build out, and it's coupled, of course, to other large changes in shipping patterns, but essentially, increased global demand, a lot of which runs through South Louisiana. We're the largest pathway for materials to move around the world, around the country, by water, measured by tons. So you're seeing this, really big expansion of economic pressures that are in some ways national and in some ways global pressures that then are focused here on South Louisiana.
A lot of my questions were kind of answered and addressed by the levies, but I had a couple questions. One was about, I know his time is very, very limited, but where the governor has been in any of this. And because after he's gone, it's a pretty despairing situation. And also, to the question about our federal representatives, obviously our senators don't seem to care at all about the state. Our two senators, I don't really know what if there's been anything on the federal level from any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for the governor at all, or any of the, I just don't have the ability to speak for any elected official, but maybe a few things to keep in mind, right? So the state did go through a climate planning activity over the last couple of years, and we're the only state in the Deep South to have some vision of getting to net zero by 2050, but which is the goal of the climate action plan. But at the same time, we're also seeing, again, like I said, this very large expansion of petrochemical facilities. And if you look at the data, our greenhouse gas emissions are more likely to go up in the next 10 years than go down. Some decisions the governor has, authority over, some he doesn't, right? You're gonna, like the expansion of the Venice, of that levee system, that is largely a federal project. So you're seeing, I think, there's a lot of different moving parts in different places. I don't know if you maybe want to add anything on this.
I do, and my response has a lot more to do with the burial grounds, but in terms of the environmental response from the state and federal, I think that the consensus on both state and federal level is there's largely a yielding to business interests. That's been my summation of that. Now, when it comes to the burial grounds, there's some progress that I think we should be able to be inspired by. Congress, US Congress, so we're talking federal now, in December of 2022, passed what's called the African American Burial Grounds Network Act. And that is in response to communities like Ironton and all over the country now discovering these grounds that there's no rules, right? And so this network that the federal government is creating runs under the Park Service. And the idea is to create some best practices, some funding, some training, so that around the country, as we discover these burial grounds, we'll have best practices on what should be done with them, because if you remember in the meeting, there was a question of, well, when you find these remains, what do you do? And the company official says, we have to curate them. And the city council said, that's not true, because that wasn't true, by the way, it's not the law. And so you can see people don't understand it. So that's federal. As far as the state, Louisiana has what you saw in the film, the slavery ancestral burial grounds, but they haven't met yet. So it sounds very promising, but it's been enacted since 2018 and nothing has happened. But the other thing I want to mention too is that under a lot of the acts that we have in the state, they protect these remains, and they'll say things like, you know, it's a crime to take these remains, move them, destroy them. But then most of them have an exception, and the exception says things like, well, except if you are using that property to raise cows, or except if you're using it to manufacture. So what that kind of tells me is a lot of these properties that I know of around Baton Rouge, there's people who own them that use them to produce milk. And so they're producing milk over these remains. And so that exception that says it's a crime for everybody else except those who produce milk, right? So you can sort of see the business interests have been weaved into all these laws, so they're accepted out of almost everything. And that has been a consistent theme locally.
Hello. My name is Joan Garner. It's nice seeing you again, Professor Bell, Councilman King, Joan Garner, and Dr. Gray. So I am here today. As you know, Professor Bell, my father was in the civil rights movement in Baton Rouge, and that history has just been recently recognized as part of Louisiana and U.S. civil rights trails. There is still much work to be done regarding the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans, because unfortunately injustices still remain. Those injustices that I'm working on include cemeteries. McDonoughville here in Algiers is one of those cemeteries that is a cemetery of the formerly enslaved. It has been taken and co-opted by the city of Gretna. The city of New Orleans bisects McDonoughville Cemetery because it's partially in Gretna and partially in New Orleans. New Orleans has allowed discriminatory land use issues that has affected my family and our property directly. I'm requesting from the city a fully funded relocation because I am originally not from New Orleans, and it's been a very cruel place for me to live. I'd like to go back to my home where I was born in Baton Rouge. And so I am here as a comment to direct this, that we cannot just address, like, in other words, the situation with Arlington is repeated. As they said in the film, if you look at the PERSAC map, there's hundreds, up to 1,000 of these plantations. We have them right here in Algiers. And unfortunately, the city of New Orleans has not had the political will to address these issues. I've been talking to the city council, the mayor, for the last couple of years now, and there's really no response, Councilman King. And yes, a commendation was issued to my father. However, there are still issues, including the apologies that need to be addressed because of these discriminatory land use issues, because while the city has honored my father, I am still subject to the unjust discrimination that has happened to my family, including the illegal expansion of McDonoughville Cemetery for private business interests that are involved in the cemetery, with an attempted land grab that resulted in my parents' false arrest, in which I'm asking for apologies and restorative justice for all of the above, including an apology for the treatment of McDonoughville Cemetery, which was segregated by the mayor of the city of New Orleans.
Excuse me, Joan, I'm trying to, I don't want to lose the question.
Right now would be to work with the city council.
I'm already working with the city council. I am speaking because I have people that I know here that are present, including Councilman King.
Okay, that's a hijack.
That's not a ma'am.
Joan, just a minute. Let's do this.
This is not a hijacking the program,
to...
because the research that I've conducted, some of it came through New Orleans Parish Public Library Archives. It is not, this is directly addressing the issues, because Arlington is directly connected to McDonoughville, because John McDonough was actually friends with Dunford, who is a free man of color with the cemetery of the enslaved. That is not a hijacking a meeting, because the history, yes.
Joan,
yes,
let me make
correct.
a suggestion. Joan, let me make a suggestion. Let's talk about, I think I heard a question. So let's talk about the question that applies to the film, because we have a limited amount of time and we want to keep this about the film exclusively.
I apologize. I want to say that for the meeting. I am sorry I misspoke, and I'm sorry.
Place in Algiers, and these are issues
Yeah.
related to Algiers, which is related to Ironton.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Just one quick question. I don't mean to hijack or anything like that.
Sorry.
We couldn't do two of those.
I just was wondering, as it relates to the lawyer education and how it relates to the as it relates to the cemeteries or the environmental crisis, what steps and efforts are being made on a monthly basis or quarterly basis or annual basis for college interns in College of Law at Southern, in Baton Rouge, Tulane or Loyola or surrounding universities to give some type of tutoring or education on the necessary issues that the people from these communities need.
So that actually was a lot to do with what I was getting ready to say in response to Joan, which is one of the points that I often make when we have these public talks, is that there's something really unique about Louisiana. And that is the fact that we're a civil law jurisdiction and we're the only one. We're not common law. And what a civil law jurisdiction means is that the legislature has all of the power. Whereas in a common law jurisdiction, judges make the law and then it gets codified by the legislature. But the civil law is a lot different because we should be interfacing with legislators when we want to change. So the problem is that people often don't realize the power that they have to walk up to a legislator and say, this is legislation I want to see. And I can tell you that this is things that I do in my practice, just seeing the non-unanimous jury law change. And you all probably remember that in recent times, but that was the result of what you just talked about. We don't like having a non-unanimous jury system, and talking to the legislature and saying, undo this. And that's how that happened. So when you're in a civil law jurisdiction, you have a responsibility to understand that legislation is supposed to be the will of the people. And so one of the ways we keep seeing change happen in this environmental universe is through people movements. And of course, we have in the back the people who taught us about the power of the people. We have members of the original Black Panther Party in the back. You all have to acknowledge them for being here with us today. But their work was all about arming people, empowering people to understand the power they held. So you notice in the film, as horrible as this was, did you see that they were successful in stopping it? That was a people movement. You would have also noticed that the people around Cancer Alley, guess where they were? They were out at the UN a few months ago because they decided if state officials are not responsive, then we're going to go to the UN because this is an environmental injustice, is a human rights violation. So I am saying to you that we have to organize in terms of community saying this is our tolerance level. And I have to yield to the men in the back because y'all are the experts on organizing people to recognize power. So if somebody from the Panthers would speak up and tell us a little bit about your secret. But to answer you also, Sharon Levine has a Facebook page where she is recruiting interns from all college campuses. Tulane has an environmental law clinic, so that's another option. And then there are two other women in the river parishes, I'll give you their names, who are doing the same work. So this is a ground level movement. And all the positive things that we've seen has come not through any member of Congress or the legislature, not through any government official, but through people saying this is not what we're willing to tolerate. Anybody from the Panthers, what's the secret? Empowering the people. Empower the people.
I don't think that would be. You could hold it. We have an election coming up, October the 14th. We have many communities not facing the same plight as you're facing, but is impacted by the environmental injustice that's being inflicted around the state. If you want to find an African-American community in Louisiana and you just look on the map, That's all you have to look at is where's most toxic. And where is most at risk. And that's where we are. I've been involved in ever since they built the Fisher Project. And that's, we have always been close together. Many people have moved there. Maryland have family that's from there, and I have family that is from that area. But we also have a comrade, Tyrone Evans, who was in the party with us, who is now representing Ken Blackman Parish. That's right. Yeah. So we have a voice.
Yes, we do.
And that's the one that won't sell you out. That's right. That's right. You know, so a thing that we have to do, and that's the reason why we came, to let you know that if it's anything that we can do.
Yes.
Because on the 19th through the 22nd of October, we giving a conference here celebrating the 57th anniversary of the Black Panther. Not here in New Orleans, but national. And what I would like to do, and what I will give you, what I can tell you what we'll do, we will show iron sharpen iron. And if any of y'all willing to come, y'all could come and be our guests and let people know the plight that you're in. Because everything that is happening in the dark. It shouldn't be that here we are this close to electing our governor. Everyone that's running our state, we this close to it. And none of them is making a statement about climate change. You know, I'm sorry, only person I've heard say something was the independent candidate that's running for governor. No one else that really talk about addressing these issues. But we got to make them address them. We got to get involved. We got to make sure that that the plight that you are going through, people know about it. I forgot the sister's name because I wasn't coming to speak. I was coming just to show support.
All right, now don't hijack the meeting.
All right. So what I want to say, there was a sister in Cancer Alley that beat the
Sharon
DuPont.
Levine.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
We need to stand up and meet them. You know, where we could start pulling this together. But it's a wonderful thing that I'm seeing. And I ain't gonna hijack no more. I'm gonna just end with what I should have started with. And that's all.
All right.
Hey, and just as a small note, Dr. Bell had mentioned two women in the Cancer Alley area who were organizing. That's Joe and Joy Banner from the Descendants Project, and they're also doing some very interesting work looking at the history of the community over there. So I would just
And one of their strengths is they've been able to arm themselves with lawyers from across the nation who are constitutional law experts. So they're fighting this from a constitutional angle, which is sort of ingenious. So you may want to watch their work, and they also recruit interns.
A very strong human thing to have a home, to feel like you're not just a house, but a community that is your home. And without it, you're just rudderless. You know, I mean, this is why people want to continue to live in places that seem unsafe to the rest of the world, because that's where their heart is and their people are.
And then the memories, think about like the memories, the things that's in your house that you just can't quantify. Like, you know, the night I sat on the sofa and we laughed about something, right? Yeah, those intangible things, because that's a lot of what the film was talking about. And then for the people who are no longer with us, what does it mean for them to be at rest? Have y'all thought about that? Like, what is rest? What is rest? What does that mean? Yes.
think about rest more than for the people who are no longer with us, because in my belief, they are resting wherever their bodies or their remains are. The people are resting wherever they are separately from the remains. But for their loved ones who remain here to grieve and mourn them, to go on, I think about they don't get to rest. I think about, our Katrina experience and our violence compared to other people. But, these different places that are suffering through these ecological situations,
All right.
they don't get to rest.
And that's a great point. And are there, I know we've got a little going on, but are there other, we'll just keep this conversation going. Are there other thoughts about what home means and why it's important to you? Yeah, please. Mm-hmm.
You know that you can come home to a place you can come home to, let go of the stresses of the things that have happened during the day. You can be, whoever you are, you don't have to worry about the people around you, because the people are there automatically care about you, and love you. And it's, it's security, and it's a place where, if you don't have, a safe, affordable, a healthy home, still, that's not the same, because it provides trust, a place of security and,
and people have talked about how stress can be, harmful to our lives. So yeah, having a place to put to hang your hat and put your feet up at the end of the day is more than just relaxing. It's often an important part of, living your life. So that's a great point. Other thoughts on, yeah, I see the woman back there.
That's the answer to what they expressed in the day. That's all we have is peace, comfort. A lot of our elders, we have one lady, 90 years old. All thing she want to do is go back home and rest.
Mm-hmm.
And she's, yes, she's getting, and we have a lot of elderly people in our neighborhood, in our community. And that's all they want to do, just go home, sit on the porch. It could be 100 degrees, but they know that they can sit on their porch and sweat their fan, but it's peaceful to them. They don't have to worry about no shooting, nothing. It's just so peaceful. And when you go home to Ironton, someone is outside, always outside. Children running around playing, going from street to street, and right now you can't do that. I mean, we have people that's living down there, but they're living. Some of the houses stood because it was already elevated. We had like 10 homes, but the majority of everybody was still not back. They gave us 8 trailers, the little travel trailers to live in, and this month, if you got a family of 4 or 5, you can't survive. And they come every week, asking, what is the update? You know the update. State knows, but what are we doing? We was as we come. That's when we came and saying, oh, you can't move a trailer back in the community unless you go up to the. Then you gotta go another extra 2. So that means you gotta go up to 14. So we didn't take it long because why not pay for something then you don't have to. You can't bring the parents and people that you bring in. So get a permit to bring it in. You can't do anything until you have the money to elevate. Now we have companies that's trying to help us, but due to the state, the hands are full. So we still fighting it. We fight you, we fight restore. Everybody can a problem. All they want to do is just go home and rest and be happy. That's what we fight.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for coming for this documentary about your community.
Go to my daughter, she got the email.
All right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Fabulous, fabulous. Oh, that's so good. Thank you all for coming out today. And like, it means so much. I'm glad that you made that journey because I know it's a journey.
I was up shopping.
Okay. Well, fair.
I was doing to come here. I'm glad I did come.
Oh, that means so much. I want to thank y'all. I want to thank you, Dr. Allen Bell, so much for everything that you have done here today and on the work for the film and just in general, like legally working on these issues that I would have to say it was revelatory to me when you pointed out that in law school, this is literally this is law, but it is not law that is taught. That was revelatory. And thank you, Dr. Kolker, for really putting like a lot of the unfortunate, like arcane government stuff going on in the background that keeps us sort of separated from taking care of our own places. Patricia Hayes wanted to note that jobs never appear in large quantity after the construction of these plants. These facilities are very automated and are not dependent on a large workforce. The construction is often done by outside contractors and subcontractors. It is all about making money, and politicians get large amounts of funds from corporations and their lobbyists. So that really puts it into perspective why there's maybe a lot of political inaction at the state and even federal level
I mean, only just to say that, yeah, these facilities, there are huge numbers of, construction workers there. But yeah, then I think the question is like, what's coming back to the community in terms of tax dollars? Often there are, large tax breaks associated with the large facilities. So there are, huge numbers of construction jobs, but I think the person was right. Often that results in far fewer permanent positions. And then, the tax revenue, I don't know all the details of the tax revenue, but it's often I think that like often they get, decades of tax breaks for being here. So I think that that is the question of like, where are the jobs and where is the money? I think is a very, very valid question that's worth asking.
And one other final point as we close, because we're talking a lot about the petrochemical industry, but I also want to mention as we think about environmental issues that are current, one of the trends that we're starting to see in the world of criminal justice is because this country loves the idea of incarceration so much that we filled up all of the prisons we have. And so we have to go look further out to build more. And so what's the most desirable places right now happens to be on top of these toxic waste sites. And so that's now the most desirable places where we're starting to see prisons pop up. So that's going to be a new issue that we'll be talking about in the future if we don't do as, we've been warned now. And so one of the most immediate things we can do is start talking to our Congress people. Everybody has the legal right to send an email and state your position on these things and ask them what type of legislation are you backing, because I'm one of your constituents and this is how I feel about this. So that's, as a civil law jurisdiction, the kinds of communications we should be having with our elected officials. They need to hear from you. And remember, all of the meetings are online. So if you can't be there, you can watch at night and hear these discussions and start thinking about where you fit into them. But the worst thing you can do today is leave here having heard this and accept inaction. And so we hope there's a charge to everybody when you leave to be a part of the solution, because this is about people power now.
And Louisiana, we are on the front lines of, environmental change, whether it is, the build out of large facilities or whether it is climate change, whether it is wetland loss, so many of the issues in Louisiana are so big that there is space for people to come in and make a difference and work on these issues. And so on one level, yes, we are on the front lines of environmental change, but that also means that there's places where everyone here can contribute to working on these issues. And so I would just, as we go home, think about, how these issues, whether it is flooding, or whether it is climate change, or whether it is, you know, petrochemicals. What's your role in all of this? And these are really, really big issues where we have more industrial greenhouse gas emissions than like the state of California. So just to put it in perspective, so there are all of these issues and places for people to do something.
Well, yeah, with that said, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank you all for everything.
Thank you guys for hosting. Thanks, Councilmember King, for coming. Thanks to the distinguished members of the Panthers for showing up, and thank you all. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you again to everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
I learned.
That meant so much.